And I learned it from a nurse who lived in New York some years ago. Her home place was Puerto Rico. There is an English word that's the equivalent in a linguistic sense. It's called spasm. But we don't use it. We don't use spasm in this sense. What she was talking about was the woman, she said it was like this. Back in Puerto Rico, when she was young, many women would go to hospital in labor. They would get to the hospital and they would no longer be in labor and they would go home. And so somebody would say, well, did your sister have the baby last night? No, she went to the hospital, she went into PASMO, and they sent her home. She went into PASMO. So it was very much understood that when you went to hospital, many times that would stop your labor. Very common, and they called that PASMO. So I wrote about this in my newer book, I guess, and I wrote about it in British midwifery journals because it's describing how a woman can start in labor, her uterus can open, her cervix can open, and then sometimes it can close once it's started. Now that is knowledge that doctors are taught is impossible. It never happens. It's in no obstetrics book in any language that I can find. It doesn't happen, they think, except that it does. And so then they're very hard-headed about it because there's no information flow from midwifery into obstetrics. It's only the other way. Because, why? Because doctors get paid more. And so, of course, the assumption is if they get paid more and they make a higher salary, they know more. It's opposite. Yeah. Because when you know about birth, the way to know most about it is to get in a room with a woman when she goes into labor and don't leave the room until she has the baby. That's how you learn what birth is. But doctors don't do that. They go in the room, okay, then you go in the next room and you know, I mean even the nice ones are kept to a schedule so they don't learn about birth because they don't stay in the room. Yeah, so that's part of what leads to error. All right, so I wrote about this because I noticed this phenomenon happen in birth 40 or something. I used to do a lot of vaginal exams during labor so I could learn how birth worked. And the women in my community wanted me to know, so I learned how to make a very gentle examination that wouldn't make the woman angry with me or uncomfortable. It's possible. You have to have a slow, soft fingers. That's all. You know, just use your imagination. Why? Yeah, nobody wants somebody poking something hard and insistent into their body. Men don't like it. Women don't like it. Yeah. So I wrote about this in Spiritual Midwifery so many years ago, about this case where it was a good friend of mine having her first baby. She was there, her husband and I, and one or two other midwives. And there was a lot of laughing and joking and happiness because here she was, we would soon see her baby. I had to leave that afternoon too, so I was happy that her labor went pretty fast. She opened quite well to about that much. And then it was funny, I thought very soon she would be pushing, and instead of that happening, it seemed that her labor got very weak. And there wasn't much happening anymore. And so I started to wonder what's going on, and I asked her if I could check again. And to my surprise, she was now open that much. And I went, how did you do it? I thought, I never saw this before. I never read about it. How did you do it? Because she was so quiet. She never complained. She didn't get into a funny position. She didn't, you know, no. But her sense of humor was now missing. She wasn't laughing easily, whereas before she was. So that was the only difference I could see. And I said, Judith, I know you can open because you already did. The only thing I can see that's different now is that you're more serious. So don't be so serious. And so that was not an unusual thing for us to say in our community. If somebody was sort of in a bad mood, people didn't let you just go, oh, well, they're feeling depressed now. People would tease you or, make jokes. Or, yeah, because you can't stand to have so many people with somebody suddenly going into a bad mood all the time. It's so fun. And also I was remembering, when I was a teenager and, you're 15 years old and a bunch of your girlfriends, you stay together at somebody's house and you make all these jokes, and a lot of them are about sex, and somebody finally says, don't make me laugh anymore, I have to pee, and it will make me pee my pants. And so then you make jokes. and so I thought, yeah, when you make jokes and somebody has something to come out, it comes out more easily. So I thought it was good enough. I just said to her, why don't you try laughing again, and then maybe it'll open. It can't hurt to try this. And so she did. She started laughing again, she opened, and she had her baby. Now I was really curious. How did she make it get less when I couldn't find it in any of my books? I looked in all of my old books. I couldn't find it. And then I would talk to people at different hospitals, maybe the nursing staff. I would say, did you ever see it where you checked a woman and she was this big and then she got less? And a lot of the older nurses would say, yeah, it happens. And I said, why isn't it in your textbook? And they said, we don't know. And then I would ask the same thing of midwives. They'd say the same thing. I said, it's not in your textbook. Why? I would ask doctors. They said, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Except when I went into the archives at a medical library and I saw the books from the time when doctors attended home births, and then it was in every book. It was in all of the books. And I'm so curious to find this out, if you'll find this to be true in Swedish. At the time of home birth, did the doctors say to the other doctor, who would always be a man, you call to the woman's home, don't go into her bedroom until the women invite you to come in. Because if you go in too early, when you decide, you can make her stop. And sometimes she could stop, not just for a few minutes or a few hours, she might stop for days. And I saw several cases where she stopped for 14 days, 19 days of PASMO. Now usually spasm in English, when we say spasm, we're talking about a cramp in the leg. But now that we're talking about the sphincter, sphincter is a medical term in English. It's a real shocking word though. And so I wanted to use that word because I thought, well, teenagers like to joke about sphincters. And it gets your attention, so then teenagers would read my book. That was my thought. And so in the film, I said sphincter on live television in New York. At the announcement, the reporter and the interviewer would, all the men on the television studio jumped. It's like, can you say a word like that? It's a medical term. Anyway, I don't know if the word is shocking in Swedish. No. Probably not. But it is in German. I was, when we were doing the translation, I said, what's the word for sphincter? And they said, Schließmuskel. And I said, we were on a train, I said, Schließmuskel? That's a shocking word. Because, somehow you have to trick people into getting an interest in birth because they think, birth, that's just for women, women that want babies. It's not interesting to anybody else. But it should be, because when you get women having babies so scared and you get the dad so scared that everybody gets cut open, then you're really too stupid to survive almost. You know, I mean, think about it. And in Brazil, it's got that way. I've been in a hospital in Brazil where the cesarean rate was 95%. And this was a hospital with a birth room. It had a birth room that nobody used. And it was, you know, it was okay, but nobody would use it. And a young woman having her first baby, they allowed me to watch this cesarean. She was not in labor. She was almost 9 months pregnant, and she was shaking. She was so scared. Her husband was terrified, and it looked like they were laying her down on a crucifix. They had this cross type of bed, and they tied her, and she's naked, and she's cold, she's scared, and then two women obstetricians march in, and just, and out comes the baby. The baby's also scared, yeah, because how could the baby not be scared when the mother is scared, and the father is scared, and the baby can feel all of these emotions. So we pretend that emotions don't matter, and emotions totally matter. So it's because it's about hormones, and so when I say this thing about the sphincter, and doctors don't even say that the cervix is a sphincter, but it behaves like one, and that's the point. So you have the sphincter at the anus, you have the sphincter at the bladder, and both of these are organs where they fill up with something. The sphincter does not get tired to be closed, to be contracted. You can't order it to open, because if you yell at it, it closes, and it's shy, so it's shy. We also have sphincter in the eye, but we're talking about the bottom. We're talking about the bottom. And yeah, maybe that's why, yeah, these are the shy ones. That's why we have doors, public toilets have doors. Yeah. And yeah, people don't poop together, you know. Men may pee together, they don't poop together. They have doors, locks, and so forth. Because some people can't poop unless they have this privacy. And if a child in the morning, 2 years old, goes over here, you know they're pooping, don't you? Yeah. Any parent knows that. Because that's how they go to get privacy, and it's an instinctual thing. So, and then something else that people don't know, certainly teenagers don't know this before they've had a baby. If you have a baby and it starts to push down, you've had no medication, it feels like you're going to poop something unbelievably big. So of course the same emotions come up. Yeah, it feels like you've been constipated for several months, maybe. And some people get afraid because they think, I never, you know, nothing that big ever came out. And often what the midwife says is, that's just a pressure, that feeling changes. Let it come and you'll find it feels better. Don't fight the feeling. And when you have, most people have had an experience where they were pooping, they're in a public toilet, you know, the fire alarm goes off, and what happens? And then, you know, it gets cut off or it goes north. Uncomfortable feeling. And see, this is the story. I think this is the kind of stories we have to tell men, because men have this happening too. And they go, oh, that's what it's about. It's like that. Oh, now I began to understand